Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into something really interesting. We're looking at the connection between maybe relaxing in a hot spring at night and, how that might impact your blood pressure.
That's right. We're focusing on a specific research paper. It's called Nighttime Hot Spring Bathing is Associated with Improved Blood Pressure Control, a mobile application and paper questionnaire study.
Exactly. So if you've ever wondered if that nice warm soak before bed does more than just relax you, maybe if it has actual heart benefits,
Yeah.
then this deep dive is definitely for you. We'll try to pull out the most important bits, keep it clear.
Yeah, our mission today is pretty straightforward. Extract the key insights from this study for you quickly without getting too bogged down in all the scientific jargon.
Okay, let's get started then. What were the researchers really trying to figure out here? What was the main point?
Well, they had a couple of main goals, really. First, they wanted to understand the relationship between bathing in hot springs, specifically at night, and hypertension, high blood pressure. And second, they were also curious about how older adults prefer to answer questions in a study like this. Mobile app versus the old paper and pencil way.
Right, okay. And I gather this study took place somewhere pretty well known for hot springs.
Oh, absolutely. It was conducted in Beppu, Japan. It's famous worldwide for its hot springs, just an incredible number and variety. They apparently have 9 out of the 10 main types of hot springs there.
9 out of 10. Wow. That really tells you something about the local culture.
It definitely does. It makes it a pretty unique place for this kind of research.
So how many people actually took part?
They had 1,116 adults involved, recruited from 14 different institutions there in Beppu, so a decent sample size.
Yeah, quite a few people. And how did they track blood pressure around the bathing time, I mean?
They used automatic blood pressure monitors, measured everyone right before they got into the hot spring, and then again immediately after they got out.
Okay, so capturing that immediate effect.
Exactly. That pre and post measurement is key for seeing the short-term change.
Makes sense. And you mentioned the questionnaires. What were the options there?
Right. Participants could choose. They could use a mobile app on their smartphone or fill out a standard paper questionnaire. This let the researchers look at preference too.
Got it. So let's talk results. What was the headline finding regarding blood pressure, the main takeaway?
The biggest finding, really, was that they found a clear association. Nighttime hot spring bathing was linked to a reduction in blood pressure among the adults in this study.
That sounds pretty positive.
Yeah.
A reduction. Was it the same for everyone, though?
No, actually, and this is quite interesting. The effect wasn't uniform across the different age groups. The study showed that the drop in both systolic, that's the top number, and diastolic, the bottom number, that drop was significantly smaller in participants aged 65 and older compared to the younger group under 65.
Smaller for the older group. That seems a bit counterintuitive, maybe. Do you have the numbers for that?
Yeah, I do. So for systolic pressure, the median drop for the younger group was 27 millimeters of mercury, with a range from 7 down to 36. But for the 65-plus group, the median drop was only 11 millimil Hg, though the range was wider, 3 to 47.
Okay, 27 versus 11 median drop in systolic. What about diastolic?
For diastolic, the younger group had a median drop of 8 millimil Hg, ranging from 1 to 26. The older group actually had a larger median diastolic drop, 17 millimil Hg, with a range from 1 to 31.
So a bit of a mixed picture on the magnitude between age groups,
Right.
with diastolic dropping more in the older group on average, but systolic dropping less. But the key point is, both groups did see a reduction overall.
Yes, that's right. Some level of reduction was seen across the board.
And importantly, any problems, any side effects reported.
That's a crucial point. The researchers specifically noted that no complications, side effects, or adverse events were reported by any participants during the study. So in this setting, the practice seemed well tolerated.
Good to know. Okay, so it seems generally safe, at least in this study. Now, did the researchers try to figure out why some people might have seen a bigger drop than others? What factors played a role?
Yes, they did. They used a statistical approach, multivariate analysis, to try and isolate different factors, looking at what things were independently linked to these blood pressure changes. Let's start with systolic pressure, the top number. What was linked to a bigger drop?
Okay, tell us.
Several things popped up. Being male, being 65 or older, also having a history of hypertension, interestingly, whether they were on medication for it or not, and having arrhythmia that's an irregular heartbeat or gout or depression. And notably, using a specific type, a chloride hot spring.
A chloride hot spring. Okay, that sounds specific. We should definitely circle back to that.
Mm.
What about things linked to a smaller drop in systolic pressure? What limited the effect?
Right, the factors inversely associated. Those included having a history of certain heart conditions like acute myocardial infarction or angina, also having diabetes or hyperlipidemia, which is high cholesterol.
Interesting. So existing conditions, particularly cardiovascular ones, seem to modify the response. What about the diastolic pressure, the bottom number, similar factors?
Some overlap, some differences. For a bigger diastolic drop, the factors were, again, being 65 or older, having hypertension with medication this time, arrhythmia, depression, and yes, using a chloride hot spring again.
So age 65 plus and chloride spraying seem consistently linked to a greater drop in both numbers, according to this analysis.
Exactly. And the factors linked to a smaller drop in diastolic pressure. Those included a history of cancer, again, the heart conditions, myocardial infarction, and angina diabetes, hyperlipidemia, and also renal disease, so kidney problems.
Right, that's quite a list, but it helps paint a more detailed picture. Let's go back to those chloride hot springs. You mentioned them twice now. Why might they be particularly significant?
Well, the study itself points to other research suggesting hot springs in general are better at raising your core body temperature than just, say, a regular bath in tap water. And for chloride springs specifically, the idea, based on some smaller studies mentioned, is that they might be particularly good at this at increasing core body temp, maybe more than other mineral types.
Ah, right.
But they do stress that, more research is needed to really nail down that mechanism.
That makes sense. Raising core body temperature could definitely trigger physiological changes, blood pressure included. Now, you also mentioned the study looked at how people preferred to answer the questionnaires. What was the verdict there?
Oh, it was really striking, especially for the older participants. A huge majority, 99.3% of those aged 65 and over, chose the traditional paper questionnaire.
99.3%. Wow, that's nearly everyone in that group.
It is a very strong preference for the tried and true method.
Any thoughts from the study on why that might be such a strong preference?
The researchers discuss a few possibilities. Familiarity, definitely, just being more comfortable with paper forms. And while the study didn't directly ask why, they reference other work suggesting older adults, maybe those with less education or existing health issues, might just find digital devices, harder to use or less comfortable.
Right, so usability and comfort level are probably big factors for that demographic.
Okay.
Okay. Did the researchers provide any other context around hot spring bathing in Japan beyond the immediate findings?
Yes, they did touch on the broader picture. They mentioned Japan's long history of habitual hot bathing. It's often preferred over showering there. And they referenced a government report from the Ministry of the Environment that talks about balneotherapeutic effects based on the type of hot spring.
Balneo, what now? Can you break that down?
Balneotherapeutic effects? Yeah, it's basically a fancy term for the therapeutic benefits you might get from bathing in mineral springs. The idea is that the different minerals in the water could have specific health effects beyond just the heat itself.
Got it. So the minerals matter, potentially.
That's the theory.
Hmm.
The study also brought up some previous research. One study suggested that even short hot baths before bed were linked to lower nighttime blood pressure in older adults. And they floated a possible connection related to sleep. Better sleep from hot spring bathing, potentially leading to lower blood pressure, especially maybe in older patients who also had depression. They mentioned findings about bathing 1 to 3 hours before bed, shortening the time it takes to fall asleep.
Ah, so an indirect benefit through better sleep quality. It's a really interesting angle.
Yeah, it highlights how interconnected these things can be: sleep, mood, physical health, like blood pressure.
Yeah.
And like we touched on, they simple back to the chloride springs again, suggesting their effectiveness in raising core body temperature might be key, citing some other small studies. Seems like a promising area for more investigation.
It really does sound like a complex interaction of factors. Now, for a balanced view, every study has limits. What limitations did the researchers acknowledge for this one?
They were quite upfront about several potential limitations. One is potential selection bias. Because it was done at specific places in Beppu, the participants might not perfectly represent everyone, even within Japan, let alone globally.
Right, not necessarily generalizable everywhere.
Exactly. Another big one is the lack of long-term data. They only measured right before and right after bathing. So we don't know how long these blood pressure reductions might actually last. Is it just a temporary dip?
That's a really important question, yeah. Short-term versus sustained effects.
Precisely. They also couldn't fully control for other things. Participants might have been doing changes in diet, exercise, maybe medication adjustments during the study. Those could also affect blood pressure. And they mentioned they might have underestimated the blood pressure changes in people already on hypertension meds.
Okay, What about the bathing itself? Did they track the details?
That's another limitation. They didn't collect specific data on like how long people soaked for, the exact water temperature they used, how often they usually bathed, or their history with hot springs before the study.
Hmm. Yeah, those details could definitely make a difference.
Absolutely. And finally, as we mentioned, generalizability is limited due to the specific cultural and environmental context of Beppu.
So it sounds like the findings are definitely intriguing, suggesting a potential benefit. But we need more research to really confirm things, understand the duration, the mechanisms.
Exactly. It's a promising start, but definitely warrants more digging.
Okay, great. Yeah. So let's try and wrap this up for everyone listening. What's the main message, the key thing to take away from this deep dive?
I'd say the core takeaway is this. The study found a significant link between bathing in hot springs at night, especially chloride ones, and lower blood pressure. This effect was seen particularly in older adults. However, and this is a key nuance, the actual size of the blood pressure drop was generally less in the older group compared to younger adults. Why that is needs more investigation.
Right, that difference between the age groups is curious. And the other main point.
The questionnaire preference. It really showed a massive preference, almost total, for paper questionnaires among the older adults in this Japanese cohort. It's a good reminder about considering user-friendliness and, accessibility when designing tools for different demographics.
Absolutely. So finishing up, this look at hot springs and blood pressure leaves us with a bit of a thought experiment for you, the listener. Given what we've learned, what kind of role could accessible, maybe even traditional practices like hot spring bathing play in managing blood pressure, or just improving well-being generally? And crucially, how can we better understand those subtle differences, like the age differences we saw and how these things affect people? What kind of research would really help us tailor these approaches to work best for individuals? Definitely something to think about. Until our next deep dive, keep exploring.